Start recording. All right, hold on real quick. And you'd think I'd have this figured out by now, but I don't.
And
290.
remind me to ask you about somebody who I will recommend to you in terms of a guest.
Fuck yeah. Well, we're recording. Mr. Michael Vecchio
Okay.
going on, author of Crooked Brooklyn and Friends of the Family, which completely, we were supposed to do that episode today, and like a jackass, completely slipped my mind. I was like, I knew I was having you on today, and I was looking at it, and I was like, what are he and I talking about? And then like the creeping realization dawned on
Yeah.
because I had Jefferson Morley yesterday, and I was cramming his book up into the last minute, which is awesome, Man in Mexico, about the CIA, JFK, and how the CIA 100% whacked JFK. Point is I finished that, did the podcast, and was just kind of chilling. Was getting into bed, and I was like, it's like what the comedian Brian Reagan says. The more in fifth grade when you wake up and you realize like that book report's due today and you
Yeah.
haven't done it yet. I was like, I was supposed to have a book read for tomorrow. And I was like, fuck it, Mike's a cool guy. I'm just gonna text him and ask him if we can redo that. So we're doing that in January. But point being, yeah, back to what you were saying beforehand. You're going on Don the Pleb show.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the, he didn't say what they wanted or what they're going to talk about, but I don't care. I'm ready to talk. So
He's he's just a cool guy. I have no idea what he's gonna do.
good.
He's
Good.
a cool
Well,
guy. Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for setting me up with that. So,
Absolutely, man. Don's a badass. I love him. He just he live streams shit. He goes to protests. I think he was in the Marines. He's got like 11,000 subscribers now. His channel is blowing up. He's cool as fuck. I love having him on, and yeah, he's helped me grow. So I was like, I'm gonna send some of my like cooler guests to him. You made the cut, Mike. You're one of the cooler guys.
thank you very much. Nice to be cool.
Of course, man. And I don't know if you're cool in my eyes. That might not be good though.
Well, that's okay. I'll
You know,
take it. I'll
if we,
take it.
so I was thinking about your book, Crooked Brooklyn, which will be in the
Right.
description. It's the heat in the top comment. Buy it, excuse me, I just had a stroke. Buy it, you fucks. But in it, you talked about how you guys did like undercover, like surveillance of that judge, right?
Yes.
How high up do you think that goes? And do you think there's any way that's happening now? Because I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago that that list was leaked by I think Sky News in Australia about the 1.95 million CCP members around the world that were embedded in corporations, institutions, and political parties on all continents.
I read about that. Yes.
Which is, hey man, respect your enemy. But regardless, they're commie traitors. Do you think there's because it's kind of weird that the Supreme Court just outright said we're not going to hear this case. And it doesn't matter if you're left or right. That's a little odd if they're just going to say we're not even going to see it. How high up do you think shit like that goes?
Well, I have to. If I gave you an answer, it would be just simply a guess.
Yeah,
But
of course.
let me
Yeah.
let me just say this: that before we started this investigation, the one that Crooked Brooklyn is the covers, it's covered in Crooked Brooklyn.
Yeah.
It was always, talked about that there was corruption. It was always speculated that there was corruption, and there were strange things that happened, strange decisions, things that you felt were against, common sense. Even forget about the law; it's this just commonsensical. And when I was appointed to take over rackets, the district attorney literally walked me to a window in his office that overlooked the courthouse. And he said to me, he asked me the following question: do you think there's any corruption in that building? That was his question to me. And I answered, yes, I do, because I had heard about it. I was practicing law for a long time, for 10 years on my own, in between my two stints in the DA's office. And there's always the whispers, and they are whispers because these things, Tom, are not done in the light of day. They're
Yeah.
not done in the corridors of the courthouse. They're done in the back rooms of the courthouse.
Yeah.
So unless you happen to be in that back room, you never really had the answer. But my answer to him was, yes, I do believe it. He said, now let's go out and find it, and that's what I did. We found what everybody believed was there. And when I did the first judge, And knowing that it's impossible in my mind for a judge right out of the box for the first time he's ever been on the corrupt side of the law, ask for $250,000 to sign a document. I say to myself, he had to have done this before. Nobody does that
Yeah.
right out of the box.
Yeah.
And then I was convinced of it during the investigation when we started to reach out for people who had cases in front of him to ask them, and these are lawyers, to ask them whether or not he had ever approached them to bribe him to sign documents. We got zero, Tom, zero help. People would not even answer the question. And the reason is because they needed to operate within that courthouse.
Yeah.
And if they had given up what they knew, I think that they felt, and probably were correct about this, their career would have been over. They wouldn't have been able to operate in a courthouse.
Yeah.
So, and I'm talking about private attorneys,
Yeah.
not talking about DAs, because DAs are on the criminal side, and it's very difficult to believe that somebody would bribe a judge on the criminal side. There's nothing in it for any party
Yeah.
in that scenario. But in the civil side, when you're talking about a lot of money, like there was in the case with Victor Barron, well, then it's an incentive to be a bad guy, and that's what Victor Barron was, a bad guy. But my whole point is that the fact that nobody told us something which I believed was absolutely true, that he had been doing this for a while, told me that I was right, that he had been doing it for a while. And it sounds crazy to be that definitive when you have basically a negative, but the negative turned to me was to me a positive,
Yeah.
that I was right about that.
Yeah.
So it didn't surprise me when that case led to the Garson case,
Yeah.
which led to Garson's cousin, who was also a judge. So 3 Supreme Court judges sitting in the same courthouse doing corrupt things for money is to me indicative of what was there. And I think we basically scratched the surface. And
Yeah.
I'll give you one other story. During the course of the investigation, we had already locked up, I think Barron had already been locked up. We may have already locked up Garson, but I'm not 100% certain of that. And I tell this story in the book. I'm walking from the courthouse to my office, and in order to do that, I had to walk down a flight of stairs, outdoor steps. And at the end of the steps, there was always a court officer. It was kind of like he was looking and watching for people who were, on the grounds of the courthouse, and it was like a guard, but he was a court officer. So he calls me, and I didn't know him. I've seen him around, but I didn't know his name. And I hear Mike Vecchione, and I turn around, and it's this court officer. And he said to me, keep doing what you're doing, because it's happening, and I got to tell you a story. And he says, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I'll tell you a story. I said, all right, tell me. And he tells me the story about how he was with a judge, assigned to a judge in the criminal side of the courthouse. And the judge got transferred to the civil side of the courthouse. And in the courtroom on the last day of their criminal term activity, he said, the judge closed the courtroom, called his staff together, of which this court officer was one, and said, we're moving to the civil side. Now we're all going to make money. He said it out loud, Tom, in a courtroom, in an empty courtroom, but in front of the staff of people. And the court officer told me all about it. So he said, you're doing the right thing. You're on the right track. Just keep going. So now to answer your question, how high does it go? I don't think that it goes to the Supreme Court of the United States. I don't, in my heart, believe that. But if you told me one day, or if I picked up the newspaper one day and found out that Justice so-and-so was arrested for taking a bribe in a case, would I be surprised? A little bit, but not totally, because I was immersed in this stuff for 7 or 8 years, looking at this. And there were people who I thought were beyond reproach. And I found out that I was wrong, and
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah.
That was essentially it. So it's a very tempting situation when you have lobbyists and you have PACs and you have people who have lots of money and they approach a politician for a particular reason, and the reason is to get one of their programs put in the forefront, or to get a law passed, or to have something done that way. It's very tempting for a guy who's making, 130, $140,000 a year to take $500,000 to do something which, if he does it right, no one will ever know he's done it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really, my idea of politicians is, I don't have any respect
Yeah.
for
No,
for
it's
them. I really don't. I
no.
really don't. And I don't have a lot of respect for not all judges, but for a good deal of, a good many judges who in my opinion, make some of the stupidest rulings that you could ever possibly imagine. They make no sense. And a lot of times now, particularly in this state, in New York, judges make decisions for political purposes,
Yeah.
because the head of the local, in New York, Democratic Party is the man or woman who controls whether that judge is going to keep that position on that bench. So, we thought, and I look back on it now and I laugh at myself. I thought that when at the end of the day, 3 judges locked up, the head of the Democratic Party gone to jail, the another assemblywoman gone to jail, all of them during this one particular period of time, I thought that we had finally gotten to the point where we would have changed the way things were done in Brooklyn. And sure enough, that did not happen.
Yeah.
It did not happen. And somebody brought what we thought was was going to be a landmark decision in a federal court, when a judge ruled that a particular way of picking judges in Brooklyn was not necessarily according to the federal Constitution. I thought, wow, we finally made some headway, and then it was overruled by another judge. So it's the kind of thing where these guys and women take care of themselves, and it's just pervasive. And even more pointed to this topic is when I was trying the head of the Democratic Party in Brooklyn. His name is Clarence Norman. I had him on the witness stand,
Yeah.
and 2 stories. And he was charged with whatever the charge was. There were 4 of them. I don't remember which case this was. But I said to him, he gave an answer on direct examination that he was ignorant of the law that we were charging him with violating, right? He said, I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything was wrong, etc. So I stand up on cross-examination and I say to him, so you say that you weren't familiar with this law? No, counselor, I was not. If I was familiar with this, I would never have done what you say I've done, blah, 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 right? So I said, really? Well, I'm going to show you something. And I showed him the bill that was the bill that turned into the law. And who do you think wrote the bill? Him.
Yeah. Right.
He wrote the law.
Yeah.
He wrote the law that he said he had no idea was a law.
It's
So, it's that kind of thing. And what the other thing I wanted to say was that these politicians write laws that protect themselves.
yeah. Yeah. It's
They believe, I think, correctly in a lot of situations, that the public doesn't even know about this stuff.
yeah.
So, and who's going to bitch and moan about it when they don't know about it?
Yeah.
But, that's, no, it's, and this was one example of it. This guy wrote a law that was that was good for the politicians. He violated it, but didn't even realize that he wrote the law. And so you could tell how really serious they were about writing these things to protect, to protect the public. They weren't. They were writing them to protect themselves and then keep the public in the dark, so they didn't even know, what was written for them. So it's a very sad situation, in my opinion, Tom. Very bad and very sad. And it doesn't seem as if it's going to get better anytime soon. You know,
Yeah.
it really doesn't.
Yeah, and I've found myself having to say this more with recent guests, but it applies to all guests. My rants and opinions don't represent my guests. So because I realized I was going on a rant yesterday, and Mr. Morley was kind of looking at me, and I was like, this guy's like a New York Times bestselling author. I was like, I can't like slander his like, hey, you're on here with me. That being said, I mean, it seems like we're getting to a point where, I mean, look at the most recent stimulus bill that I don't think's been passed yet. Every American's getting $600, but
Yeah,
Sudan.
it
Yeah.
passed. It hasn't been signed yet,
Okay.
but it's
Yeah.
passed.
Okay. Well, $700 million to Sudan, $50 million to the Smithsonian. It's like $500 million to gender studies in Pakistan. I mean,
Yes.
and at first glance, it's like, oh, this is just retarded. But then as you kind of use your brain, you're like, it's these people aren't stupid. All these things around the world, these are fronts, these are slush funds, and they use the taxpayer to dump money into them. And these are all somehow or another being kicked back to the very politicians pushing them. And they don't fear us. They don't let us go outside. Now in Oregon yesterday, some people tried to storm the Capitol building, and their riot police kept them at bay with MRAPs and tear gas. Meanwhile, in the Portland legislation or in their state constitution, it says that like I think it's like the hallways have the same, I guess, like classification as sidewalks, meaning that any person can go in and watch what's going on for
Oh,
transparency.
I didn't
Yeah,
realize that.
and it's getting to a point though, and it's getting to a point where, I mean, they're not allowing for auditing of the Dominion machines. They're not allowing for ballot counting. They're saying that you can't look at this. Stop it. It's just if this gets counted, stop looking at this. And it's getting to a point now, and if you speak up, it's deleted on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. But this channel, sure enough, this podcast will be going down soon because YouTube said if you post anything about election fraud, you will be wiped clean. So everybody go follow this podcast on Rumble and BitChute, two video sites. But the point is it's getting to a point that it's starting to dawn on me now, and it's like, oh, this is why the founding fathers were such hard asses and gangsters, is because they were like, yo, this is going to happen eventually. Maybe not in your lifetime, maybe not in your kid's lifetime, but they're like, this is going to happen eventually. And as they knew in 1776 and as they knew in 5000 BC, it gets to a point where you kind of just got to clean house. And man, I hate to admit it, but I'm looking at it more, and it's like, I saw a bit with the comedian, the New York comedian Ari Shafir, who's like brutally. He's always raw. He's one of Joe Rogan's friends, but I saw an interview with him like 4 years ago. He's on some morning TV show, and the guy's like, Ari, when do you think politics are going to change? And he's like, they're never going to change. They're going to change when politicians start getting executed. And the guy was like, this was like Good Morning America or some shit. And the guy was like, what? And he was like, Ari's like, I don't want it to happen, but he's like, look at human history. Like my grandparents survived the Holocaust. He's like, look at the Arab Spring. He was like, how do things really change? He's like, this very nation, what was its inception wasn't from Kumbaya. Its inception was born out of the blood of tyrants. And it's like, it's not a good thing. I don't want that to happen. But ultimately, it's like pursuing your dream. And it's like you can pursue a dream, but the reality is fear is what got me into medical school, not love. Like that's the truth. Fear that I'm going to be a failure. And I'm trying to like walk between the lines because I don't want to like openly call for violence because I don't. But at the same time, just your examples and the examples of SCOTUS now not hearing a case. I mean, at a certain point, it's like, man, like I know it's a cliche, but like the revolution won't be televised. Like no one voted out Hitler. Hitler died because he committed suicide because there was an onslaught of Soviet rain of artillery. Japan surrendered because the land of the rising sun. That day there was three rising suns, right? Or August 6th and 9th. The point is
Yeah.
yeah, it's and like I don't
Listen,
want it to happen. Yeah, sorry,
the
yeah.
the idea is that, and this was we just figured this out very quickly in the investigation, and we did was that power corrupts. There's just no doubt
Yeah,
about it, and
no,
absolute power corrupts. Absolutely,
absolutely, yeah.
so. It's what it is, and with this Judge Garson. he was basically getting his after he paid when he was the lawyer, and it was his turn to start collecting, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened. That's why he did this. He had paid off judges when he represented the taxi industry in New York before he became a judge. Then he became the secretary treasurer of the Democratic Party in Brooklyn, and was an absolute corrupt organization. And probably if Rico was in place back when he was involved with the Democratic Party, there could have been a Rico case against him. But he felt at this point that, listen, I'm now here. I'm in the position of power. I'm going to get what I can get.
Yeah.
And there were people who were willing to take care of him. And it's listen, the one other thing, not the judge, but the assemblywoman who we talk about in the book. She was another person who was in a position of power, and we're not talking about power at the top of the pyramid. We're talking about power on a very, very low level of the pyramid, but in her area of the pyramid, she was at the top, and that's a local politician. She was an assemblywoman, okay, and a New York State assemblywoman. But in her neighborhood, she had power over things like getting construction permits signed quickly for people who were building houses. She could do that kind of thing, and that's very valuable to a person building an apartment building or building a string of homes, because the faster you do it, generally, the faster you are able to, if you can pay off the loan to
Yeah.
a bank, then the rate goes down, the interest rate. So if I'm looking to do this and I get the local assemblywoman to make a phone call to City Hall to get my permits, passed quicker or quickly, then I'm going to build my homes quicker.
Yeah.
So she knew what kind of power she had. Is she a queen? No, but in her little area, she was the little queen.
Yeah.
What she did was she said to this builder who was looking to have her help him, build me a house, build me a house, and build me a house, and I am not going to pay you a dime. We're going to have a phony mortgage, which you are going to give me as part of your operation, but I'm not going to pay you a cent. You're going to simply pay off the mortgage or somehow get rid of it at some point after I'm in the house. And where she wanted the house was outside of her district. He was building a whole series of homes, some in her district, others outside. She didn't even want to live in her own district. She was building the house and getting the house outside of her district. So on top of her corrupt attitude about things, she didn't even want to live among the people who she was representing. She wanted a house that was outside of it. And it turned out that she picked on the wrong guy, because he had gotten into trouble on Long Island here in New York, and he was an informant. And once she came to him, he said, and he was in trouble. So informants look to inform on so they can get out of trouble. So he went to the city Department of Investigation. The Department of Investigation came to us because we had a track record by then of taking on politicians, and we were able to do this investigation. And her defense was that, I really wanted him to do that, but I told him after things had gone too far to stop. I don't really want it. I don't want it anymore. And a reporter asked me on the way out of the courthouse when I did the arraignment, what do you have to say about her saying that after she wanted it essentially canceled? My answer was, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And that's exactly what she was trying to do. It was she had already been corrupt. You can't undo the corruption that she had already exhibited. So, but think about what I'm saying is that you don't have to be a major player You just have to be in the right spot at the right time as a politician to make money. And that's what was happening. The Democratic leader was making money because what he was doing, one of the things he was doing was that he was directing people who were running for office, who wanted his backing, to um, to to use people who he knew to print their flyers, to print hand cards, to do the work, that kind of work. And what would happen is those people, the guys that own these printing companies, would kick back to him. So he would say to the judge candidate, you want to be a judge? Okay, I'll support you. But here's who you have to use if you want your flyers printed, if you want your petitions printed,
Yeah.
if you want your cards printed. And if you don't, well, you're on your own. You're not going to get my backing. And in Brooklyn, without the Democratic leader's backing, you don't have a chance. So he did that to two judge candidates, and they basically said, no, we're not doing it that way. And he didn't back them. They testified. These three women that we had who were judges testified in court crying. I mean, basically what they said was that this guy ruined our lives because one was a judge who was running for reelection. So she had been a judge for years, and now she was running for reelection. She needed the party backing. He wouldn't give it to her unless she used the people that he wanted her to use. Hire this guy to run your campaign. Hire this guy to print your flyers. Hire this one to do X, whatever else needed to be done. If you don't hire those people, I'm not giving you our backing. And that was the death knell. That was it. That was the death knell. You can't win without the party's backing. So
Yeah.
so there's another example. This guy happened to be a little higher on the totem pole, but he was not the top of the totem pole. He had enough power within his little realm that he was able to take care of certain things for himself. Ultimately, it was for himself because he was putting money into his own pocket.
Yeah.
And it's the way it is. It's the way of of politics. And and you know what I was accused of? I was accused of criminalizing politics. That's what the lawyers who represented these people,
Oh,
all he's doing is criminalizing politics. And I just simply turned around and said to the judge, no, 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 no. They were politicizing crime. They were the ones who were basically criminals who were pretending to be politicians helping people. And Tom, I got to tell you, when I did the first trial, it was the first time the judges pled guilty. So there was no jury.
they're just like, screw
When
it.
we did a jury trial for Clarence Norman, the first one, we did the whole trial, and his lawyer I knew the guy. He used to be my boss in the DA's office long before I became what I became in the DA's office. He had left and gone to private practice. And he would kind of laugh when we would come into the courtroom, say, you got nothing here. You're not going to win. When the jury said that they had a verdict, before we knew what it was, he and his client were all patting each other on the back. They were happy, happy as hell. And the jury came out. And when they asked what the verdict was, and it was a lady, a woman foreperson, said guilty. I thought the lawyer was going to have a heart attack. Never mind his client. The lawyer out loud said, "Oh, no, no." And hand to God. Afterwards, we talked to the jurors, and they told a couple of my colleagues that politician, the dirty word was politician.
Yeah.
3 times, Tom, 3 times out of 4, a jury of this man's peers convicted him. And each time he tried to portray, himself as being a politician for the people. Well, he used the wrong word, because politician was the curse word, not the word that was going to get him, help from the jury. And it's, the way it is now. I would bet you dollars to donuts that any trial in this country now, with a politician as a defendant, a jury is going to come back with a conviction.
Really, it's it, but it feels like that needs to happen, right? And it just it's kind of what you said, where it's like even if you don't have like the evidence of corruption, do you think there is corruption in that building? But it's like your gut is just saying like, yeah,
Yes.
it's the same thing. Like it all seems so hairy at the and like you said, it's you don't have to be the king. You just got to be somewhere on the totem pole. You can be a big fish in your little pond. Hey, I control the building permits for this neighborhood. Yeah,
Without a doubt.
you can wield
Without a
that
doubt.
sword. Yeah,
Yep.
but it's as it goes higher and higher. I mean, damn, if it just I don't
Well,
know. Yeah,
let me tell you, let me give you one other example of exactly what you're talking about. When we were investigating Garson, what he was doing was he was taking money from a lawyer to fix a case. But in order to get the case in front of him, it goes into a wheel and somebody goes in and literally picks out the judge's name, right?
really.
So yes, to guarantee that this lawyer's cases would get in front of Garson, they were paying off the clerk who was in charge of assigning these cases. Now they told us, and I didn't mean literally picking out, it's a computerized
Oh, okay. In my mind,
lottery.
I thought it
No,
was
no,
Wheel of
no,
Fortune. I was like, is this
no.
where we are?
They used to do that, but the computer had an override
Yeah,
component to it. And the clerk, if Garson's name didn't come up, the judge, the clerk would override it. And lucky for us, when we did the investigation, when you overrode the name of the judge that was actually picked, it would be stored with a color,
okay,
like Garson would then
sure.
turn out to be in red or in green. I forgot what it was. So we were able to figure out that someone was doing that, right? So that's one. So here's a little clerk in a room able to make sure that this lawyer's cases got before Garson, right?
Yeah,
Now Garson leaves the bench. He took a quote unquote leave of absence because he was helping us to get the Democratic leader.
yeah,
While he was out, now no one was in a position to help this lawyer who was still working for us. And one day, the court officer who was in Garson's courtroom, assigned to his room, said to our lawyer literally in the men's room, you know, I'm around. I can help you. He was now going to assume the role of the clerk because he would go to somebody in the clerk's office and get the case assigned to Garson, if this or to any judge, if this guy wanted it to go before a particular judge. He had no idea that the lawyer was working for us, and what he wanted from the lawyer, he wanted electronic equipment. He said, "I'll do this for you. I want a VCR." That's how long ago this was. "I want a VCR. I want this. I want that." And we had the lawyer put this stuff in big black garbage bags, literally carried from the trunk of his car into the courthouse with one of our detectives filming the entire thing. The court officer was so stupid that he didn't even wait in the building. He stepped out onto the street in full view of our cameras as we handed him the bags with the electronics in front of the courthouse. So that got him hooked. Then he told our lawyer that I want cash next time. So the lawyer said, "Okay, I need this case put before Garson." He didn't know that Garson was off the bench at that point. He still thought Garson was around. "I need this case to get in front of Garson," and he literally told the lawyer who was working for us, "Come to the men's room," and he paid him off as they were both standing at the urinal. It was like something you would make up for
can't.
television. Or
Yeah,
so the court officer, of course, lost his job. I mean, he basically lost everything he had for a few crazy, refurbished electronic equipment, because
yeah,
that's what we
yeah,
ultimately gave him.
yeah.
And
It's if you're gonna do
so,
it, do it for nine figures. If you're gonna
Always.
do it for
Yeah,
9 to 10. No, do 10 figures.
exactly.
You want at
Exactly.
least a billion. Like if you're gonna do this shit, don't do it for a VCR. Do
Yeah.
it for a
Well,
fleet of Bentleys and a 747.
hey, look, Garson was doing it for lunch, for lunches, for dinners, for bottles of wine, a bottle of whiskey. I mean, come on.
I'm trying to
Unbelievable.
I'm trying to pull it up. It's I said it the other day. It's free on Audible for everyone listening, but specifically you, Mike, is The Plot to Seize the White House by Jules Archer. And it's about the business plot. And it's really kind of poisoning my, like you said earlier, like in your heart you don't think it's happening, but you wouldn't be that surprised if it was. This book, and I remember reading about it like once in college, but never really got into it. It's called The Business Plot, capital B, capital P, that began in 1933. Major General Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine in U.S. history, went in as an infantryman, enlisted, and rose to the top. I mean, truly rags to riches.
Okay.
Was buddy buddy with FDR, like ran through World War One, the Chinese interventions, the Caribbean interventions, did all that shit. He was approached by, and this was in 1933, guys that quote could have 3 million in cash like the next day and could have 300 million within like a week. So he was the people that were contacting him eventually kind of let the facade fall, and they had mentioned in no uncertain terms that they were working with J.P. Morgan, with Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George Bush, and what they wanted to do is they hid it under the face of the bonus army. If anyone remembers the World War One vets that weren't getting their bonuses, so they went out and like made shanty towns in front of like the Capitol, and eventually
Right.
they used MacArthur before World War II to go get rid of them, move them out. These guys that approached them were both former vets. So Smedley Butler, he apparently was just big heart and was always open to listening to vets no matter what. So these guys approached him, and it was a Trojan horse. And these guys were like, what we want, the point of this whole rant is like, what we want is you to come speak because we know that people will rally behind you and listen. We want you to come speak, and we want to undo FDR's act of removing our currency from the gold-based dollar, going to fiat, and FDR obviously got rid of every dollar has to be backed by its weight in gold, not weight, its value in gold. These guys came up and said, we want you to undo that, and they disguised it as because our veterans aren't going to get bonuses. Well, they are, but then it's going to be inflation and they're not going to be worth anything. So he was like listening to it. He later figured out that what they really wanted was they didn't want that non-gold backed system because these guys were backed by JP Morgan, like descendants of Rockefeller, and they
Right.
themselves had buku bucks. But the point is, and I haven't finished it yet, but I do know the story. Smedley Butler kind of went along with it just to figure out what they were doing, and then like exposed it because it was a plot to overthrow the White House, quite literally get rid of FDR and establish their own people. But it was a fascist coup in 1933. But the point of that whole rant was that J.P. Morgan, not the corporation, the man, and the grandfather and father of two presidents contacted with $300 million in 1933 the most decorated Marine of all time to do what? To overthrow FDR. Like, it doesn't get more sensational than that. And that was exposed because Smedley Butler was a patriot and didn't give a fuck. Was like, no, fuck y'all, and not those exact terms, but like, if that happened, I'm not sure I can throw out the idea that Supreme Court's paid off by the CCP or Russia or anyone for that matter. Walmart. It's. I'm going to send you the book. It's it's melting my mind,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's kind of nothing can go up. Your book was the first introduction into it. I'm like, okay, it's possible, but it's probably not probable. This, I'm now like, well, if that's possible, why
So
wouldn't it?
Tom, listen, when we did when I locked up the first judge,
Yeah,
Aaron, and I went to the chief judge in the county to tell him what was bad news, and what had happened, he was flabbergasted. I mean, he was just flat. And I knew him. He's still alive, so I know him for a very, very long time. This chief judge, he took the fall because the powers that be felt that I guess, somebody had to take the fall for this corrupt judge, and he did. Another judge, as pure as the driven snow, was put into his position and now became the chief judge of the county. Well, within about a month, I was back in front of her telling her what a second judge of hers. Now, this is one right after the other, and she couldn't believe it. But the one thing that we had going for us is that she was really a straight arrow, and we needed her to sign the warrants for the video recorder, for the audio recorder, all of this other stuff. She scrutinized everything carefully, but gave us everything that we needed in order to do the investigation properly. So, I'm not sure why I started on this rant, but the bottom line is that there are people in power who are not corrupt, Tom, and you can't ever forget that.
Yeah.
Because if you believe that everyone is corrupt, then
Then
you
why?
might as well just simply, move to some island in the South Pacific and just live there on your own, and and do the best you can. Make your own government. You
Yeah.
can't really believe that, and it's not so. As much of a cynic as I am, based on what my work, how my work kind of affected me, I don't believe that everybody is corrupt. That's just not the case at all.
Yeah.
Because I look at myself and look at
Yeah.
the people who work for me. They weren't corrupt.
Yeah.
We worked in that system for for a long time, and nobody in that worked in our office with me was corrupt. There were some ADAs who got into trouble for doing things that were corrupt, but there are others who were and still are, just straight arrows. They're not going to bend. They're not going to, certainly not break. They're certainly not going to bend at all even. So, I'm just trying to tell you that don't get totally turned off to government, and because then we're doomed. If you
I
do, we're doomed.
I definitely needed to hear that.
Yeah.
Specifically today, just going about my day with everything going on, listening to that book. I definitely need to hear. Well, I'm not kidding. My logic was, I'm not bullshitting you. I was like, why am I? If it's all shit, I'm like, why am I not? Literally, I was like, why am I not in Hawaii right now? Why don't I just bring the laptop out there, live stream from there? Fuck it. Find some hot hula girl, go surfing. Maybe I get eaten by a shark, maybe not. Whatever. It's all
Yeah.
fucked. That
You
was.
could
I'm
do
not.
that. You could do that, but you then have to come back.
Yeah.
That's the vacation,
Yeah.
not the life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just realize that. Look, if it wasn't for the two judges that I talked about, the administrative judges, I would not have been able to do what we did
Yeah.
to bring the people that needed to be brought to justice to justice. Believe me, I would not have been able to do it. And it's and you have to have that kind of faith in
Yeah.
our government, in our institutions. But you have to be mindful of the fact that there are people out there who are, no matter how much they want you to believe that they're good, they're not.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just not. So
It's good to love your neighbor, but you should lock your door.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You have to understand that there are people out there who are going to take advantage of you, no matter what. No matter what. Listen, with the two Garsons, an example of that. I know that sounds like I have an example for all of these things,
Yeah,
but
dude, it's great.
this
That's why
case,
you're here, Mike, is because you have shit to talk about.
listen, Garson, the cousin who was a judge, was in charge of their mutual aunt, had a nice little nest egg,
Sure.
and he was in charge, because she had no children, of watching over her and taking care of her and making sure that her money was secure, etc.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, we found out during discussions when we had Gerald Garson wired, not himself wired, but the lawyer talking to him. Gerald Garson began complaining to our lawyer informant that his cousin, Michael, was essentially looting their aunt's estate. And he wasn't upset for his aunt. You know what he was upset at? That if his aunt suddenly died, or died maybe in 10 years, Michael would have looted everything, so he wouldn't have been able to get his half of his aunt's estate. That's how evil
Yeah,
these people were. He
yeah,
didn't care about somebody breaking the law and hurting a relative. He cared about what was going to be left, if anything, in this pot of money for him when his aunt finally passed away.
that
That's
it's
so.
it's kind of
So
like Heinrich Himmler, because he the arch or no Eichmann, sorry, Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the final solution.
yeah,
He in the final like months of the war, they were really not happy with the sort of double pincer that was happening with Russia and America and the British, and is because not just because they're losing the war, but because they were not going to stop diverting resources to run the trains to the concentration camps. So despite the fact that death was approaching as Eisenhower comes marching from here and the Red Army comes marching from there, they were still saying like, "Oh shit, we don't have enough time to finish off the Jews." It's like they weren't mad that like, "Oh, our glorious 1,000-year Reich lasted
right.
5 years." They were like, "We don't have enough time to kill all the Jews," and it's like, you really are evil. Like, I mean, through and through. Like, you really are evil. Like, holy shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are evil people in this world. People are corrupt to the bone in terms of some people. They're just that's just the way they are, and it's if you can sell your soul for a box of cigars,
Yeah. Like he
then
did.
you are a bad person, a really bad person. And again, if you see that your elderly aunt, who has worked hard all her life, and she did work hard all her life and built this nest egg up, is being looted by your corrupt cousin, and you're only worried about what's going to be left for you, then there's no redemption for a person like that, none whatsoever. And he and his lawyer, that's his Gerald Gostin, at the trial, I had him on videotape counting money that the lawyer handed him, counting money, putting it in his pocket,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the rest in his drawer. And he told the jurors that what they never that he said in his summation, his lawyer, and of course the client had to give him the okay to say it. My client never took a dollar, and you never saw him. Nobody ever saw him take a dollar. Now that's just a stupid, because all I had to do was stand up and ask the judge to allow me to play the videotape once again.
Yeah.
I said, this is what he's saying. You're not seeing what you're actually seeing. And this is what they expected this jury to believe. Well, of course, the jury convicted the guy with no problem at all. But that's the kind of mentality that we were dealing with.
Yeah.
That if you see something in front of you, you're not seeing what you're seeing, and they think that people are going to buy that. But there are people in this country who do buy that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
The sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Don't look here, look over here,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And
Yeah. Or yeah.
my analogy during my summation was with one of these guys was that what he's trying to what this lawyer is trying to do, this is one of the other cases in the corruption series, was a magician does in Las Vegas, where he wants you to believe that he actually made an elephant disappear by getting you to what he's doing is getting you to look somewhere else or pay attention to something else as they walk the elephant off the stage. And
Yeah.
then he takes the curtain away and says, the elephant disappeared. Well, that's what he's trying to get you to do. The jury, of course, with all nodding their head because they understood what I was trying to say. And it's
Yeah.
just like that. It's just like a magician. Don't look here where you could tell what I'm doing. Look over here where you're not paying attention to me putting the ball in my pocket or
Yeah.
doing something, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
So
It's 1984. The party's last and final order is to
Yeah.
ignore what your eyes and ears are telling you.
Yep.
You're looking
Exactly.
at this happening, and right now, if someone walked in and I'd be going, I'm not talking to Mike right now. I'm not talking to him right now. He's not on my MacBook screen for episode 293. Like, that's what it is. But it
Exactly.
gets to a point, though, where a lot of people just go, oh, I guess he's not.
Yeah.
And fuck, that's, it's like that CNN headline this summer where that auto shop was burning and the ticker at the bottom, or the whatever, the headline said, fiery, comma, but mostly peaceful protests.
Protest. Yeah. I know.
Like it was a weather condition.
People bought it. People
Yeah,
bought it, Tom,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah. It's
Unfortunately.
it's
That's why I say to you, don't you've got to not completely turn your mind off to the fact that there are people who are good and people who are on the up and up and people who are not corrupt. You can't do that, because you in a certain way become like the people who you've just criticized,
yes. You take your
and
head to the sand, yeah.
you can't do that. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So,
It's yeah. Yeah, that's definitely where like the mind goes of like, why am I following any of this? Why do I care if a judge did that, or if this election was rigged, or if Smedley Butler was won over by JP Morgan? Like, why am I doing this? How come I'm not just turning it all off and just having guests on here and shooting the shit, smoke some weed, drink some beer, go to bed, and wake up tomorrow and do it again? And it's because, as tempting as that is, because apathy, it's like a great,
yeah, you're
it's
right. I don't say be apathetic.
no,
That's not,
it's
yeah, you
tempting.
can't be that either.
Yeah, it sucks you in. It's like a hot shower. It's like, come on
Yeah,
in. But like a hot shower, the hot water eventually runs out.
right. Be
And
aware, be mindful, but also understand that there's a good part to the way that we live. Listen, we lasted all these years, this country, for
yeah,
a reason, because the foundation is strong. That Constitution is very, very strong, and it will ultimately take us through
yeah,
this problem. It really will,
yeah.
because it has to. It's lasted this far, and the other kind of government that people want and push has been a failure everywhere. It's
Every
been
single time.
everywhere, and as there's a reason for that, because it's just a bad system, and ultimately people wake up and say, wait a second, what am I doing? I'm not I'm horribly worse off than I was before. So ultimately people will, if it ever came to pass, which I don't believe it will, but if it ever came to pass, it would not last very long.
No,
It-
I think yeah. I think that I think if there was a takeover of America, people always say there could never be a civil war or revolution because if America fell, the whole world would fall. Yeah, I think that's kind of the mindset. Is like, well, you know what? Then we're just gonna burn the whole thing down. Like it's so. Hey, don't try it here. But you're right. There's a reason why 100. There's a reason why this system's lasted for 244 years, and why we still have a $9 trillion GDP, and why communism killed 16 times as many people as Hitler in the
yeah.
20th century. Okay,
Well,
yeah,
and it's important that you keep the faith. That's the thing. There are
sure.
people, who have done things who to fight this kind of corruption. You're looking at one. I mean, I basically became a pariah in my community, that legal community. People wouldn't even talk to me, and because I was taking down some of the sacred idols, and it's, you just have to understand and accept the fact that you're going to take your lumps, but you're doing the right thing. But I never lost faith in the system. I never did. There are things that are bad about it, but overall and I kept looking back to those two administrative judges that I talked to you about. I said they knew, they were, and one of the best things that ever happened to me in this whole investigation was, I think I may have written about this in the book. I was at a lawyer's event. If it was a Christmas party or if it was a bar association event. And basically, and I don't mean to be dramatic about this, that if I was walking around with a drink, people would literally, move aside because they didn't want me to engage them in conversation. That's how bad things got. Except one judge who I knew for a long time, came up to me and said, "Keep going. You're doing the right thing. Good."
Fuck yeah.
And that's it. And that was all I needed, Tom. That was all I needed. I knew that I was on the right track.
Yeah.
So,
That's well.
yeah.
I think that's what I needed today was to hear that from you. That was
Good,
good.
good,
Thank you, sir.
good,
It's
good.
good. Good. Get my fucking grow up hair. Stand up straight. Don't
There
mope
you go.
around. Let's fucking do this
And
thing.
in 3 days it'll be Christmas. So that's
3 days
another.
it'll be Christmas. Fucking right. You got to keep the positive. Thank you, Mr.
Exactly.
Zagioni. I needed that injection of sunshine today.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. You're
I've been
welcome. You're
I've
welcome.
been pouting around like a little bitch today. Thank you. I
Yeah.
needed that. But author of Crooked Brooklyn, which will be in the description, stick you in the top comment, and we will do an episode in January, Friends of the Family, and you will be on Don the Pleb Show, Plebeian Media, next week, and Don's
Yeah.
gonna
Next Tuesday,
next
3 o'clock.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
3 o'clock. Yeah, yeah, he's
So
got.
you'll give me a date in January and we'll do Friends
Yeah,
of the.
I'll send you my calendar, right? I'll text it to you in like 2 minutes, and then just
Terrific.
I'll give you my open days. You choose a date, and let's do it.
Good.
And yeah, Don's a cool guy, man. You'll like it.
Very good. Very good. When you stop recording, I want to talk to you about this
Sure, sure.
other guy.
The three. I'll tell you when I stop. And oops.